by the way, there's 1,000 camera crew and so forth. Good luck. Right? And so this picture here, and I was still confused. They were asking me questions. I didn't answer any question. The only question I answered is like, how you feeling? I mean, they'd asked me, the pilot, how you feeling? And I said, I'm feeling fine, because I had a feeling if my mom was watching this, I wanted her to know that I was okay. But other than that, I didn't know what to say, because I was in shock. And so you can see the nice, cool New York Waterway hat, and underneath that I got a New York Waterway, I got some good apparel, by the way, sweatshirt. Go ahead, next picture. And I'm wearing it there. So this is a reunion that we just had this year, and I always wear my New York Waterway hat. Everybody's all dressed up. I'm like, this is great, you know. And so this was pretty amazing. That's my wife, Laura, and there I am. And this was during our, this past year. The Charlotte Aviation Museum holds our plane. So how cool is that? And what I do, or have done, although I'm waiting for the Aviation Museum to open, since COVID it's been out of commission, but it's going to reopen, I'll tell you a little about that, is I go and volunteer. I go about once a month, and I spend time and visit, talk to the visitors, and I stand by my plane and I share my story, just like this. Because, why not? I mean, if somebody's going to go see the plane, wouldn't they want to see more about it? And so it's rewarding to me. Initially, I was kind of doing it because it just made me feel better, but after a while, I'm like, maybe this is just something that's what I want to do. And so I've enjoyed that for a few years. It's been out for like 2 or 3 years, but it's going to reopen, and it's now going to be called the Sullenberger Aviation Museum, after Captain Sullen. And so he came into town, and we had a wonderful afternoon gathering of like a big event with the mayor and over, and then at night we had a reception. This was at our night reception, and it's always good to see Captain Sully, so I was very happy to see that. Is there any more pictures? I'm not sure. That's it. Okay, so I'm going to open it up for any questions, because sometimes I tell the story and I add some things I don't and so forth, and some people want to know certain things, so please feel free to ask me any questions. If anybody has.
Dan.
Yes. Hey, Don. How do you, man?
Classy.
Come on, man. All right, man.
How high were you when the first strike happened?
It's like a little over 3,000 feet.
So you just taken off and you were just swinging around to get back.
Yeah.
That's been like entire careers in aircraft parts.
Yes, yes.
And
Give this guy a round of applause for what he did.
minor, obviously crashes. I also taught at MCC.
Did you?
Here in aircraft parts for 20 years. And when the plane hit, I always tell everybody that I know, count seats to the exit and know where to go.
Right.
Was it a mad dash for the front of the aircraft because everybody was going to come in that way or thinking they got to go to the front of the plane? Because when we talk to the students and that during class and that, we say people are kind of like cattle. They came in the front door, they're going to go out the front door.
Yeah.
Was it like that at all on the aircraft? Not at all?
No. So it was your nearest exit. And so the guys that were on the exit row did their job greatly, but again, they admittedly say they didn't read the card. It's only because they had a couple minutes.
I always read the card.
Yeah, well, I do too now, but I didn't before. But luckily they had time, they had a couple minutes. They're like, okay, we might need to open up the door. So they did a great job. But to your question, no, we went to our nearest exit. So we overflowed or flooded really the wings. That's where most of the people, either from behind it or even in front of it. Only the first class and maybe fewer seats, a few rows behind it went up front. And then the only other group that went up front were, I mentioned the people in the back of the plane. And when they finally were able to get turned around and go up front, that's where the flight attendants and
so they were directing the people where
they told them,
that's their main job.
come up to the front, because you got the rafts, right? And so, but most, I probably, if there's 155, I'd say probably close to 100 were on the wings, right. And then the rest of them were probably in the front. So.
The slides didn't detach?
Well, the front slides?
Yes, the ones that are out. I always wonder about that picture because their design is detached.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to share a passenger story. So one of them did, the other one didn't, and my friend Barry Leonard, he's like, that didn't attach, and the flight attendant, well, you got to jump. He's like, there's nothing to jump into, right?
Right, exactly.
And so, but he did. So he jumped, and by the way, Barry broke his sternum, and I think what he did, I mentioned first class was great, but I think how he broke is when the plane hit, he went down like that, his knee, I think, hit his chest, and then he jumps into the river, and he's trying to swim away, and then it finally deploys, and then luckily he was able to swim back, but he had some massive hypothermia.
Normally, flight crew is supposed to.
Can't hear you.
Oh.
And it'll float away. Like, oh.
They were able to ground it somehow, yeah, I think. But like I said, one of them didn't unlatch right away, and I don't know honestly, the whole story behind that. I just know it finally did unlatch, and they were able to use it, and then keep it held in whatever they were supposed to do. But yeah, good question. Yeah.
Did both pilots land at all? I mean, they talk about Scully all the time, but I think there was another guy in there.
Yeah, when Sully does his talks, he does give Jeff equal billing. And so, interesting enough, Jeff was actually the main pilot on the flight. So Sully Jeff has more flying hours than Sully, but Jeff flies the other type of planes, not the Airbuses, but the Boeings. Yeah, so he's got tons of Boeing hours and he has very little Airbus hours. So Jeff took over and Sully said, why don't you fly so you can get some hours on this plane? So he was the main captain. But as soon as the bird strike hit, Sully turns around and goes, my plane. And Jeff's like, your plane. So Sully took over the plane and Jeff was going through the book trying to figure out, the book is this thick. It's not written, it's written for problems like when you're 30,000 feet in the air, not 3,000 feet. So we didn't have much time, so they had to kind of abbreviate it. There were some things that what happened in our event has changed the way they do things today as far as, the checklist and so forth. So he was helping him with the checklist and other things like that. And Sully was flying the plane, but you talk to him, it's equal done. The thing is, it's what we do is, we gravitate to probably one person, and Sully just happened to be the pilot, and so that's why he's gotten kind of the claim to it. But without a doubt, Sully does always include Jeff in as equal, So. Yes.
How close was the movie to your experience? How much did they dramatize it?
Yeah, so people ask me, the movie isn't called The Passengers on Flight 1549, the movie's called Sully, right? So it's about Sully. Ultimately, I thought they did a great job. But as far as our experience is concerned, it was much more terrifying. I mean, they show one scene when the birds hit the plane and the passengers are just like, drinking their drink. It was frightening. I mean, we were terrified. In fact, they had the crew was like standing up, and nobody was standing up. Okay, it was awful as far as that is concerned. Ultimately, I think they did a very good job. I mean, it could have been a piece of crap, and they would have hated that to happen. You got Tom Hanks, you can't lose with that deal. So, again, I'm pleased with it. I actually got to be in the movie. I got to take part of it as Clint Eastwood has actual members in his movies. A lot of his movies are true stories, and I got to be part of it at the end of the movie, and that was really cool. But I thought they did a really good job. Yes.
Was the turbulence that you experienced from the fan blades and the engines disintegrating?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
The turbulence that you experienced from
the birds
strike, was that from the jet engine fan blades tearing up?
It must be.
Being out of concentricity, I guess.
I mean, I don't know the whole, true detail as far as, when you've got like a lot of birds were like the size of bowling balls going in there, and bird strikes are common. I mean, not super common, but they're common enough where they'll have one. Have you ever had a bird strike?
Multiple bird strikes.
Yeah.
Probably what the turbulence was more the loss of both engines.
Okay.
Because you had in Rochester where birds will go in and the engine explodes, shrapnel goes into the air.
Okay.
So it obviously didn't happen.
Right.
When the birds went in, you killed the engine.
Correct.
Probably can't shut it.
Yeah. I'm glad you're here, Doc. Thank you. Appreciate it. Back there.
Did you fly home to Charlotte?
I was waiting for that question. So you could have paid me $1 million to fly home that day. And they did. They offered, you know, hey, we got a flight out at, you know, 9:30. You want to go? I'm like, oh, no way. Again, try not to swear here, okay? But some passengers did. I mean, Joe Hart, he gets on the boat. He picks up his phone and calls U.S. Air and he, hey, you got a flight for me? And I'm like, oh, hey, Mr. Hart, well, we got a flight at 7:30. And he looks around and he's like, you know, I don't think I'm going to make the 7:30. How about a little later? And Bank of America, there was 12 Bank of America employees because Charlotte and Merrill Lynch were merging, and this was a business flight. I mean, it's Thursday afternoon, so this is their normal flight. They go back and forth. So Bank of America flew out their private jet that same night and picked them up. Now, for me, like I said, I was just going to. I'm driving home. I can't fly. It's awful. But then I finally got to a hotel later that night, and there was a couple first responders there. I was so glad somebody was there, and they go, well, you know, what can we get you? And I go, well, the bar's right over there. And let's start with that. And so I had a couple glasses of wine, and one of the things that I'll never forget, he goes, were you in the Hudson River? I go, yeah. He goes, well, you better go take a shower right away. I'm like, all right, okay, and I did. So I went up to the room, it was about midnight when I finally got into my room, and I had no luggage, right? I just had what I had. And then I turned the TV on, and that's the first time I got to see what really happened. I didn't know it was a bird strike up until that point. And you all know that probably if you had your TVs on. I didn't know the captain did what he did, which was super amazing, until I started watching it like you all did, and I got to kind of settled down and calmed down. They interviewed Robin Roberts, I remember this, and she has an apartment that overlooks the Hudson River. She saw the plane, and just the way she explains things, really calm like. Just kind of helped with soothing. I called my family. I just kind of was able to kind of suck it up a little bit, and then I didn't get much sleep, I know that, but U.S. Air gave us all a phone number to call. It's like an emergency response team. So whenever there's any situations like that, people in different roles would fly out into that area, but they didn't have to be at night, but say, call this number in the morning and we'll help you. So I'm like, well, okay, it's like a little piece of paper. I called it and I told them who I was. I go, okay, somebody will call you right back, and she did. She called me back in like 10 seconds, and it's like, Mr. Ben, what do you need? What do you want? And I go, well, I think I'm ready to go home. I was ready to fly home. Okay, where are you? And so I went over that, and she goes, anything else you need? I go, well, a coat would be nice. It's pretty cold out there. So they brought a town car, picked me up. Went to the Newark airport, was my closest airport. And let me tell you one thing though. So when I got to the airport, I'll tell you, if you ever want to skip the TSA line, get in a plane crash the day before. Right through. Walk right through, it's great. And so I'm waiting, and they're saying, we're sorry, we don't have a first class seat. I said, I don't care, I just want to get home. Just give me an aisle seat. And I remember walking on the plane. I was the only passenger on this flight. And I was the last person. I was escorted on, and people were looking at me. I think they must have made an announcement because people were just staring at me. And I'm full flight, I'm getting up to my row, and there's an elderly woman sitting in my seat, leaving me the window, right? And I didn't want the window. And my escort was ready just to pick her up and throw her in the window. And that was her job. And I said, you know, that's okay. I'll take that. I'll sit in the window. So I did, and as soon as we took off, I just started crying. I just started bawling my eyes out, and it just, the emotion of it all just took over. And this woman was so sweet. She's holding my hand and hugging me, and that was also the time when they were charging for drinks. Remember that short period of time, right? And I go, can we get her a glass of water? I mean, it's like, I think I could have probably drinking 2 bottles of vodka. I would have allowed that. But anyway, so that was my first flight, and I mention that because I'm glad it got it out of the way, because I can't imagine being on a business flight and I started crying. I'm like, who's that crazy guy crying over there? I did fly back to LaGuardia about a couple weeks later, because we did Good Morning America. And you know, it was a really cool thing. Although flying to LaGuardia was not anything I really wanted to do, but I got on the show, and I mentioned that because of Robin Roberts. And then I went to her after the show, and I wanted to thank her on the way she presented. She's just a sweet person. So that's when I started. That's when I flew in.
How long did it take to get your luggage back?
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. I mean, I chalked that one up. I didn't think anything of it, and then all of a sudden I found out that they sent all of our stuff salvaged it and sent it to this company in Texas that's what they do. The nice thing about them salvaging it, it's going to the actual passengers, not the next of kin, right? You know, as far as that's concerned. So to them, this was special. And so the thing is, it was a long trip of mine. So I had an overnight bag, check bag, and then even a suitcase bag. And so anything that was checked that had my name on it, they knew it was mine. That was coming to me, and they had my computer bag. But I had an overnight bag, and a lot of us did. And because of that, nobody's names went in it. So they set up a website for us to go online, and they took pictures of all the overnight stuff and says, if that's yours, go ahead and check it, and we'll give it to you. So I'm opening up, and I'm seeing it. I'm seeing like people's underwear. I mean, we're going back and forth like, okay, who's got the smiley face underwear? And I had dirty underwear. I'm like, you guys can keep it. But I remember it came in like about 4 months later in May, and it was in the afternoon, and I just got boxes, and I opened up a box, and they had a bounce sheet wrapping every little piece of article. It was just a weird, awesome day. I was just laughing. I mean, I was talking to other passengers, they're crying. It was just an emotional, weird day. And the stuff I got back was, anything electronic was garbage, clothes. I got my running sneakers. The one thing I did get back, which I thought was really special, is I was reading a book from Michael Connolly. Maybe you've heard of him. He's a very famous crime drama author, Harry Bosch, Lincoln Lawyer. And I was reading one of his books, but that went into Hudson as well. But I got it back. It was all disheveled. And I said, I'm going to finish reading this. I finished reading it. I said, I'm going to reach out and get him to sign it. So I found his agent, and she's like, Michael would love to sign that book, So I sent it off to him, and that's one of the cool keepsakes I got from my luggage.
I took video of you because my 8-year-old grandson, who I'm visiting here in Rochester, really wanted to come. Doesn't sit still real well, but one of his questions was, he wanted to know what it felt like to maybe die. And I think you covered that very well. Yeah. And I have one other question. Do you have life jackets on there? Were you able to?
Well, life jacket is another thing. So as much as I forgot my seat cushion, there was only like about 8 or 9 passengers that grabbed a life jacket. So we had things to learn from. Okay, this was not done well as far as, this could have been a lot worse. We're lucky that it wasn't really needed. So, but only about 8 or 9 passengers grabbed a life jacket. Now, one of my friends, Balaji, who's from India, although he lives in California, originally from India, I went and saw him a couple of years later, and actually him and I went over to Sully's house, so that was a really cool experience. But he grabbed a seat cushion, or not, he grabbed his life jacket. I go, Balaji, wow, quick thinking, man. Way to go. I didn't think about it. And he looks at me, he goes, I can't swim. So for him, that was a matter of life and death. For me, I could swim, and so it wasn't as big of a deal. So, but yeah, that was done poorly. If there's any downsides to it. So, yeah.
Do you get free luck flights for life?
Yes, I don't. It's funny I get that asked. If this happened in the 70s, probably, right? That was the heyday of flying, and it's just, it wasn't. This is anything after 9/11. They really cut that. Now, what US Air did do for us is, and I'll share all this. They gave us their premier status for a year, and which for me, the way I flew, that actually was pretty good. I flew just enough that it gave me a higher status, so I got first class. But some passengers don't fly at all, so that meant nothing for me. Other ones already get that status, so not much there. Now, I'll keep moving. I'll talk about compensation. So people are like, well, we were compensated, for what happened. And so the luggage thing, they started off, they wanted us to get a list, and then they said, heck with it. We're just going to give you all $5,000 for your luggage. If it was more, then just let us know, write down what you had, and they would, I had a crappy laptop, and $5,000, great, so I got $5,000. And then people ask a question, like, did anybody try to sue the airline for what you went through? Not that I know of. I've heard some rumblings, because again, we're kind of a small group. I think they were all waiting for the NTSB report to make sure that it truly was just a bird strike. And that's what came out. That said, I got a letter shortly after the final ruling from the insurance company that basically said, we'll give you $10,000 if you promise not to sue the airline. And I go, well, where's my pen? I was like, I'll take it. I wasn't expecting anything. I was just happy to be alive, but I'm not going to turn down $10,000 either. You know? And what I did though is half of it I gave to charity, and the other half went to my son's mouth, his braces. So. Yeah.
2 questions. One is, how did they ever get that baby onto the boat? And the other one is, what lasting effects do you have?
Yeah, so I really don't know much about the baby. One quick side note to the baby though is when that first boat came out and they're young, I don't think throw the baby. I'm like, what? You know, and so I was on the wing and they wanted me to somehow get the baby, walk the baby on the wing and somehow lift it up. You saw how high they were to them. And I'm like, I just fall in the river. I'm not gonna take that risk at all. So I don't really know how they did it. I think they must have had somebody come down and kind of strap her and the baby up and bring them to safety. So I'm sorry I don't know that answer. What was the other question?
Lasting effects on you?
Yeah, so again, you could get 150 different lasting effects for what people did. My one passenger quit his job and just traveled the world. Another, she quit her job and adopted a son. My seatmate got his pilot's license for all crazy reasons. All right, let's go. For me, I think it made me just a better person. I mean, I wasn't a bad person, although if we talk to my Aunt Sugar, she might tell you something different back there. But I think it just gave me a better perspective on life. You know, the small stuff got smaller. I mean, I've talked about the 2 main things that I got out of it. One of them I just mentioned is how I got to see the wonderful things in people and what they did for us that day, which was fantastic. And the other one is like, you know, life is short. This is our time, folks, okay? I'm sure my great-great-grandfather was a wonderful human being, but that was his time, okay? This is our time, so we need to make the most of it and enjoy it while it's here because it's not going to be here forever. And so I've kind of gotten that, and I try to help more, donate more, and do things like that for the most part. One other thing too is I was in an audit and kind of in that career. My real true passion is what I'm doing now is helping people. Well, you know, maybe it doesn't sound exciting for all of you, but I help people with their money. And I just started over again. I said, you know, I'm going to do this because this is what I want to do, and that's where I'm at now. So, hope that helped. Yeah.
At what point did your family know what was going on?
So, my wife, I had told her, I tried calling her, and I left a voicemail saying, hey, I'm on this early flight. You know, I got on this early flight. And then she tried calling me back, but we were taxiing, so I couldn't really answer it. And one thing you know, it kind of chokes me up every time I think of it is when somebody said brace for impact, I never got to say a chance goodbye to my wife. And that was awful. I'll tell you some stories about other passengers. They did, you know, with text messages. And one passenger was talking to her husband as we were going down crashing, and he's stuck in a car wash, and all of a sudden it shuts off, and he's like, car wash, and my wife just died. But, so I got rescued, and the gentleman in the white shirt had his phone with him. I didn't have my phone, and he let us borrow it, and you know, so I said, well, let's try this. So I called her, and she picks up, and I don't have no idea what she knows at this point. And so I just said, hey, Laura, I'm okay. I was in a plane crash, and I'm on a boat. And I'm like, let's see how that resides with her. And she's like, what do you mean you're on a boat? You know, the crash made sense to her. So I told her, I said, listen, turn the TV on. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was. And let everybody know, reach out to everybody, let them know, okay, but I got to go because other people need to use that phone. And that's the first time she knew. Now, she didn't know that was going on the TV, but she did turn the TV on, and she didn't make a phone call to anybody. She was in shock, just trying to look for her husband. And of course, that was the early part of it as far as that, you know, plane crash. So that was her first mention of it. And then as far as the rest of my family, my boys, they were young enough where I wanted to try to keep the drama out of it. So I got home and say, hey, you know, your dad just landed on the water, and some nice guys came and picked him out of the river. And then they go to school the next day and go, dude, your dad almost died. Cool. Yeah.
Did Sully actually glide the plane over the George Washington Bridge or under it?
Well, if it was under it, probably he got over it. He was about 100 feet. Now, The story is like, wow, that was a close call, but, you know, Sully knew he had plenty of room to spare, I'm sure. But it was about 100 feet above the George Washington Bridge is what we cleared it. And if you think about the whole event, after the horrific bird strike, we really had everything that went in our favor, right? We had the Hudson River, which in January, that wasn't busy, calm day. We had Captain Sully, obviously, and where we landed, I mean, the perfect storm kind of helped us all survive that day after the bird strike. You know, they say the next time this double bird strike would be, you have to win Powerball twice for that to happen, but I still have a fear that if it does ever happen again, that they're not going to have the same result that we did.
Part of what made that a miracle is the Hudson River, because it's right in New York.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of ferries, they had a lot of sightseeing boats.
Yep.
So, and they, in the movie, it showed them coming right over.
Yep.
That wouldn't be available probably anywhere else, but.
Right. Well, exactly. Exactly. I mean, I kid when I've done talks in Charlotte, and Lake Norman is like not too far out. And it's like if it landed in Lake Norman, they'd be like, well, let me finish my tea first, and then I'll get you. I owe a debt of gratitude for the people in New York and New Jersey. They got it down. Now, what I've been told is after 9/11, they started to have some training as far as rescuing if a plane would land in the water. And so they actually had that. So in some aspects, the disaster situation of 9/11 might have actually helped us at some point because of that extra training that they did on the waters. But I'll tell you, people in New York and New Jersey don't always get the best, but
By the way, they are cleaning up the Hudson.
Are they? I'm never going back. I don't care. Anybody else? Yeah, back there.
Was Sully under house arrest before the Inquisition and they kind of tormented him in the movie that he should have gone to Peterborough or gone back, and they simulated the flight? Was that true that they were really possibly going to arrest him for not going back?
Yeah, so a good movie has a good villain, right? And so I'm sure Sully's conversation with Clint led into the fact that the NTSB were asking these questions, but it was not nearly as bad as it was. In fact, Sully, when we had our 10-year anniversary, kind of reversed and say, they weren't as bad as he was not going to lose his pension. There was no house arrest. Okay, they have a job to do. Okay, and they have to ask hard questions, and they're going to grill them. So that's going to happen. I mean, that's part of what it is. But it's just that part of the storyline was kind of embellished quite a bit, and I knew that from watching it too. I know they were, because I was actually listening to the hearings, and we were able to see it broadcast, via my computer. As far as it, in fact, at the end of it, when they, obviously said this, they said this is one of the very, very few times like we're happy that, every time they have a final hearing on it, people are dead, or there's been some sort of disaster. And this was it's actually a breath of fresh air that this ended up being a positive story. So I hate to burst anybody's bubbles that if they thought the NTSB was as cruel as they were, but they really weren't as bad. They had a job to do. Yeah.
Were any of the passengers called before the NTSB to testify or give statements?
Yeah, there was a couple. The NTSB contacted all of us, so they got a hold of me right away the next day. And they were asking me questions they already knew, but my brain was in a fog. And they said, well, how long was that flight, Mr. Vinton? I go, it must have been 20 minutes, right? It was 5 minutes. I mean, the brain is weird. That first responder showed up when? I said, maybe half an hour. No, it was more like 10 minutes. So, but I know at least one passenger that was brought to the hearing. There might have been two. Yep.
I know that Sully is retired from flying due to passing the age. I think Jeff is still flying. What about the cabin crew? Did any of them return to flight duty?
Yeah, so Sully, he flew for one more year, just as a token of, I'm going to fly a year. He had already written his book. He didn't have to fly. He was going to be all set. He just did it. He could have flown more if he wanted to, but he was done. Jeff is flying internationally. So, he'll do some talks and things like that, but he's still flying and he's doing great. So he's flying internationally out of Chicago. He lives in Milwaukee. So the three flight attendants, Doreen, Donna, and Sheila. Sheila was in the back, and she had enough. She's like, and the back of the plane was a lot worse, for her than it was in the front. That was the worst place to be from what they went through. And so she never flew again. And it's interesting, I mean, they're all my friends, I love them all, but when they did some of their stories, like on Letterman and all these other things, she would never wear the uniform. Only the other two would. And I was always wondering if she had like some sort of thing against US Air, or maybe she was suing them or something, or she was being advised not to wear it. I never got that story, but she was done. The other two, Sheila, that was Doreen, I'm sorry. Sheila and Donna were in the front. Sheila just retired this past year. I think she handled probably the best out of the three. They all had to stop working for a little while, but she continued on, and she has just retired. And Donna went back, but it was a much more harder struggle for her. And I honestly don't know if she's still up in the air or not, but that's what all of flight crew are currently doing. Yeah.
I just want to say, I'm a flight attendant, and we are trained for this.
Yes.
We actually train in a pool. We jump out of a plane. We have to inflate slides. We have to do this exact thing. So you've got to listen to your flight attendants.
Yes. Yes.
Please, we know what we're doing. And I understand the lady in the back not going back to work because she knew her doors, her two windows were underwater.
Yeah.
She knew you guys weren't going out those doors
Right.
and told you to go forward.
Yeah.
So they did their job.
They did. She struggled with it because
Yeah.
people didn't know that. It's not
Exactly.
their fault.
Exactly, because you're told to go to the nearest exit, and that's what
Yep.
they were doing. Was it true, though? Was Sully like the last one off the plane?
Yes.
I could see that.
Yes.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, he did the walk through, and he was the last one off the plane. That's true. Back then I flew a lot, so I would fly, and life was great after that. I mean, should you get checked? My wife said, should you get checked out? I'm like, oh, let me run with this, and it just every day got better and better and better. I mean, we dream a lot and so forth, and it was hard to work, but I was just always in good spirits, and because I'm amazed I was alive. But except for flying. And so when I'd fly, sometimes I'd say, maybe I'll introduce myself to the flight attendant or the pilots. I'm like, and every single time I mentioned it, they were like fascinated. Said, come on up, and
I'll give you a tip. And everybody, when you fly, take the flight attendants a little thing of candy. You're golden.
There you go. Candy for the flight attendants.
You're golden.
I'll tell you though, when I tell my story, they didn't give me candy, they would sneak me bottles of liquor. It was
Yeah.
I like it. Yes, sir.
This accident happened in, January of 2009.
Yep.
In August of that year, my wife and I went out to Oshkosh, Wisconsin for the External Aircraft Association.
Yep.
I'd been a volunteer of a program out there to introduce kids to flying between the ages of 8 and 17. For my volunteer efforts at the dinner, my wife wanted a flight in an airplane the next morning.
Yeah.
So we get out there, we're standing in line, and who's introducing, escorting us out to the airplane and everything? Jeffrey Skiles.
Jeff Skiles, yeah.